Okay, this is by far the most requested artist I've had so far in this series, and this might end up being the longest episode of any show in this series because we're never going to talk again about a steel player quite like Curly Chalker. It took a lot of time and a lot of research to put this episode together, and I've unearthed in the process some really hard to find recordings, some real gems from Curly Chalker's career, and I'll share that with you here and include the links in the video description. So buckle up, grab a cold one or a coffee, whatever your style. Get comfortable as we take a ride on the C6 neck for a little closer look into the man who played with Lefty Frizzell, Hank Thompson, Merle Travis, Ray Price, Simon and Garfunkel, Johnny Cash, Roy Clark, and the Wilburn Brothers. He played on the original 1951 recording of The Wild Side of Life, one of the all-time classic honky-tonk songs, and yes, he is in the Steel Guitar Hall of Fame. This is the story of Curly Chalker, whom the mighty Les Paul once said was his favorite all-time steel guitarist.
Curly Chalker.
Curly Chalker was raised on a farm in Alabama, and he started playing steel guitar when he was around 7 or 8 years old. He left home at 13 to begin playing and touring professionally, and he worked with radio bands until 1959. He was also a great lead guitarist and a trumpet player, and he faithfully served as a corporal in the United States Army during the Korean War. One of the first sessions he played on must have been this debut take of Hank Thompson's Wild Side of Life. That was in 1951, released in 52, and that's so long ago that Hank Williams was still alive. Other vintage sessions included Lefty Frizzell in the early 1950s, Mom and Dad's Waltz, and Always Late with Your Kisses, one of the most influential songs in the history of country music. Curly got his first taste of show business as a staff steeler on the Ozark Jubilee TV show, which we saw at the intro video leading us into this episode. He would eventually wind up in Las Vegas and began playing clubs and hotels from 1963 to 1966. In 1967, he makes the big move to Nashville, Tennessee. Curly was immediately hired for many recording sessions, possibly due to his early hits with Hank and Lefty. And like all the first-generation players in this series, he made a series of uncredited appearances on records, everything from chart-topping pop hits to indie country acts from Sweden and Denmark. Now, Bobby Seymour said in an article that Curly worked in a gas station for a while just to fill up his daytime hours, and he learned a lot about automobiles through that job. Curly's favorite car was his black 1953 Cadillac Fleetwood, which he kept immaculate. Curly would reach a mainstream audience playing steel guitar on the Hee Haw television series. This provided more security than a string of one-nighters or even the Nashville studios, so a lot of Curly's time in Nashville would have been spent on that set jamming with our friend Leon Rhodes from the Buddy Charlton episode, as well as Roy Clark and many other very highly reputable Nashville musicians. Speaking of pop records, Marie Osmond's Paper Roses and Simon Garfunkel's The Boxer both feature a trace of Curly's playing in it. He played live or in studio with Willie Nelson, the Gap Band, Ray Price, Leon Russell, Merle Travis, George Jones, Little Jimmy Dickens, and he even rocked around the clock with the original Bill Haley and the Comets. The sound he had developed largely on his own was just something that made him stand out among the players and producers of those sessions. One producer was so impressed that he created a project featuring Curly as a soloist in front of the Nashville Symphony Orchestra. Eventually, many years later, the result was released as the Counterpoint album that came out on Tom Bradshaw's Steel Guitar Record Club. Bobby Seymour has a kind of different take on Curly's session work in Nashville, saying Curly's stint as a studio musician was not that well accepted like it should have been. He was extremely inventive, could not be stumped on anything that he did. However, he was just plain not a country steel guitarist, nor did he want to be. Every time I saw him, Bobby says, he'd complain about producers and hillbilly music and how much he missed the West Coast. Luckily for us, Curly did release 5 instrumental albums in total, and the first one was produced by our good friend Pete Drake. We'll talk about that in the discography section coming up shortly. And Curly allegedly almost went to jail one time for whacking a drunk over the head with the metal leg of his pedal steel guitar. And ironically, this temper often attracts pedal steel players to him even more, since he did do it to stop the drunk from leaning on his pedal steel, which I guess is like the worst thing you can do to a pedal steel player besides, pouring a beer over the fretboard of their guitar. Now, Curly Chalker passed away on April of 1988 in Nashville. He had been suffering from a cancer-related brain tumor, I'm sorry to say. Curly was inducted into the Steel Guitar Hall of Fame, and his plaque reads, "An individualist who advanced the steel guitar into pop and jazz music. He created his own country swing genre and maintained his musical integrity during the popularization of the steel guitar's commercial sound. A musical technician who invented bar quaking and introduced volume pedal gutting. His cascading chords delivered with the speed and single string riffs identify his unique style as the Chalker sound." The late, great Bobby Seymour has some pretty fun memories of Curly Chalker here for us. He says, Curly could be one of the most arrogant, sarcastic, insulting, mean-talking individuals in the world. Most people knew when to totally stay away from him. I've been bitten by him a few times, Bobby says, when we were in Nashville and we were both competing for the same work. I found he could be a horribly aggressive competitor, then turn around and be the greatest friend one could ever have. Bobby goes on to say of the first time he ever met Curly, which was at the Ardmore Air Force Base in Oklahoma. He was playing with a 12-piece Western swing band in a small club. Bobby saw someone setting up a Fender 1000 steel guitar and running the wires through a twin Fender Bassman amp. And Bobby thought to himself, well, this is going to sound horrible. He said, I went over and asked this skinny guy with the fringed shirt and the cowboy hat who the steel player was going to be that evening. And he said, I am. Then he stuck out his hand for a shake and said, hi, I'm the great Curly Chalker. Bobby said, I've heard of you. I hear you're fast like Joaquin Murphy. And Curly replied, well, if I slowed down and didn't play as many great chords, yeah, I could sound just like Joaquin. Bobby then said, I immediately realized I had made a mistake. And about this time, Curly sat down to tune up, and it sounded like all the bugles in heaven coming out of those 8 10-inch speakers. What an incredible sound. Forget one time he was playing at a club in Printer's Alley here in Nashville. I snuck into the club and sat in the far back and was mesmerized all night with his tremendous playing. He was working a trio, just himself, bass and drums, and backing up some of Nashville's greatest singers. At the end of the night, I just walked up to the stage to say something to him, so I sauntered up and said, great job, Curly. I really enjoyed it. And Curly replied, Well, I guess you should. You've been sitting there all night in the back of the room afraid to let me know you were in here. And this scared me, Bobby said. I didn't know anything else to say, so I just left. And what an incredible sound it was, bringing us into the trademark style and sound of Curly Chalker coming up next. But first, here's a clip of Curly playing on the Wilburn Brothers TV show with the late, great Jimmy Capps. Curly Chalker's style and sound. So Curly is considered by some to be one of the greatest of country music's pedal steel players. And like a few players we featured here, he was indeed a master craftsman who was always primed and ready to go. Besides acquiring the nickname Curls, he was also known as the King of Chords for his mastery of enhanced jazz chords, which was really quite unrivaled among steel players, save for maybe Buddy Emmons or Jerry Byrd. He was noted for the expression he could put into a phrase. His style was complicated, which fittingly matches his personality, and Jerry Byrd has said that the steel guitar is the most personalized musical instrument, and really sincere feelings can be felt when they're played by masters like Curly Chalker. Obviously, we think a lot of Jerry Byrd here at this channel, and I've got a number of quotes from other members of the Steel Guitar Forum here on Curly Chalker's sound. One fan says his C6 was different, starting with his tuning and his setup, then his approach. It was true jazz, and at times bebop. I've never heard him in a true Western swing setup, though. I am inclined towards his jazz, but I also feel that Curly's E9th was some of the most tasteful ever put on tape. It's believed that Lloyd Green may have got Curly into playing E9th or was instrumental in getting him interested into it. If that's true, he certainly got to Lloyd's level pretty quickly. Someone else said, the C6 neck is meant for individualism. Jerry Byrd showed it, Buddy Emmons recertified it, and Curly was all about it. So I guess you can see here that Curly was really loved for his C6 work. So what we'll do now is take a look at a few clips of him playing on the C6 neck, and then we'll juxtapose that with some clips of him playing E9th. And yes, he did use the top neck of his guitar for C6 tuning and the back neck for E9th, which is the opposite of pretty much all other players. You're going to notice that immediately when you start watching this. It is an uncommon setup, but he was not the only player to ever use a setup like that. So remember, the C6 neck is, of course, the deeper, darker sound. It's a lower register, and the E is higher. The different chord altogether. One's a 6 chord, one's a 9 chord. So the easiest way to summarize it, if you're not a steel guitarist or a musician, is that the C6 neck is the one that's going to sound pretty jazzy for the most part, darker than the other neck, which is the one that's predominantly used in modern country music. Curly Chalker's discography and recorded work. Now this is quite a complex journey to try to piece together. My job here is just to compartmentalize all this stuff for you as best as I can, keeping in mind that there is going to be stuff that's not mentioned here that he was on, stuff that was uncredited, but hopefully we can make this a little less overwhelming. Let's start with Hank Thompson. Curly recorded with Hank on and off from the early 1950s right up to the 1970s and possibly even into the 1980s. I've got some help from a great site here called 0 to 180. They put a lot of research into this list of Curly Chalker albums, and you could check this site out sometime. A lot of great information here. Here are some of the records that Curly is playing on, either entirely playing on the whole album, or he's playing in sections of the album. We see 1952. This is a 1952 recording. It's called The Air Shots. This is a live concert. This was reissued in 1990 on the Country Roots label. 1973, Dot Records, Kindly Keep It Country. And then Doing My Thing, 1977 on the ABC Dot labels. This one over here on the right, the best of Hank Thompson, and then the 5 or 6 pictures of him in different colors. That came out on Gusto Records in 1980. I think Gusto also paired with Starday for a bunch of releases. Anyway, I've heard rave reviews of this record. It's nearly impossible to find. It's totally out of print. It's not online anywhere. And it sounds, from what I've heard, like it might be one of the coolest albums in this lot. And I believe it is Curly playing front to back the whole record. But Hank Thompson back in the swing of things down here with the red border, 1976, that's on Dot Records. Over on the right, in yellow, Cab Driver. This is a really interesting record. This is Hank Thompson doing entire tribute to the Mills Brothers. Now, someone said in a forum that Big Jim Murphy was the steel player on this record, but I can't find proof of that anywhere. I can find many examples of Curly being listed as the steeler on that session, though. So I've put that there. And then this one in the middle, Hank Thompson, The Thompson Touch. Really nice album. A lot of jazzy stuff on here. This is on ABC Dot, 1977. Now, I've pictured a couple of 7-inch, some 45s there, just in the background. And, of course, there's a ton of singles that came out, stuff that didn't make it onto albums. So what I've done is I've gone and made a playlist of everything I could find in my research, and I added it into this playlist of Curly Chalker playing with Hank Thompson. And it should make for a pretty good playlist as well. I've set it to public, so you can listen to it, and you can help me out if you know something that's missing from this list. You might be able to add to it yourself. I've tried to set it up that way, but if not, we'll get it sorted out. It's a nice playlist. There's over 100 songs, I believe, in it already, all of Curly Chalker with Hank Thompson. Curly did some sessions with Don Gibson. You could track down these songs if you wanted to. You could take a screenshot of this, for example. And these are all the sessions that he did with Don Gibson. You can see the studio information, the tracks. I'm not the guy to ask about Don Gibson, so I have not really put a playlist or anything together for that. Here's a couple of pop albums that were mentioned earlier that Curly worked on. Marie Osmond, Paper Roses in 73 on MGM. And this is the single for The Boxer here, The Boxer and Baby Driver. That came out in 69 on CBS. Curly's playing on these tracks. I honestly can't remember how much of him you're on these tracks. I haven't listened to these songs in a while, but there is some steel guitar on these tracks. That would be Curly Chalker. All right, we're getting into the country albums now. This is kind of a cool selection of albums. I mean, how diverse is this? We've got Lightning Fingers, Roy Clark, Curly playing on 5 or 6 tracks on that. That was 61, Capitol Records. That would have been one of the very early sessions that Curly did of a Nashville artist. He does appear on a George Jones album. Curly Chalker and George Jones and Tammy Wynette all together on this 1971 release on Epic called We Go Together. Pete Drake as well playing on that album. So Curly was often paired with Pete Drake on Nashville sessions. They worked together a lot. So you'll have to decide for yourself which songs have Curly playing on them and which ones have Pete. In theory, it wouldn't be too hard to differentiate the two. Now, this is a cool one. This is Doug Kershaw's 1972 album on Warner. Just a real alt country legend, I guess you'd say. Doug Kershaw. Bunch of great players playing on that album. Curly was on a whole bunch of Charlie McCoy albums, instrumental albums. Of course, the whole gang on there, all the A-Team players. That stuff came out on Monument. Now, these Hank Wilson records, Leon Russell alter ego known as Hank Wilson, there's two of these albums that have Curly playing on them, and obviously you have these records. You have to have these in your collection. These are just legendary honky-tonk albums, and I've already talked about them enough on this channel. Dick Curlis, live in Wheeling, West Virginia, Jamboree. This is a killer album. This is one of the coolest records that I stumbled onto in this whole research journey of Curly Chalker. It's got Buddy Harman on drums, Harold Bradley on guitar, there's another legend on stage, and Curly Chalker, and definitely recommended listening. Dick Curlis live in Wheeling, West Virginia, on Capitol Records, no less. And then we've got Mel Tillis and Nancy Sinatra over here on Elektra Records in 1981. I have no idea what that album sounds like, but just a pretty cool assortment of really all over the place country albums I thought you'd get a kick out of. This next slide is made up of sort of odds and ends, different kind of stuff outside the genre. A couple of country things on here. 1971, this is Rock Around the Country, Bill Haley and the Comets. Well, be the only album that Curly's playing on with them, so that's a pretty cool album for collectors if you're into that kind of music. We've got O.B. McClinton Country here. This is an interesting album. A black guy, O.B. McClinton, doing his sort of soulful, inspired country songs here. Really, really interesting record. I'd never heard of it before. It looks really cool. It sounds really great as well. This 1976 Attic release, it was released in Canada on Attic Records. This is Chinga Chavin's Country Porn album. Now, this is a record that is kind of on par with some of the vulgar David Allan Coe stuff that was in underground. This is going to be an acquired taste for most. I will say that the country music that they're playing on this record, and the steel guitar in particular, is dyed-in-the-wool country, like hardcore honky-tonk stuff. It's really great, but I don't know if the lyrics are going to work for most. They don't really work for me. It's just too vulgar. It's too extreme. A very odd, kind of curious album in the history of country music, really. One that I'm not sure I've heard anybody talk about in public. And Curly Chalker had the balls, I guess you could say, to play on this record, because not many people would attach their name to something like that. This Flying Fish record here, well, Flying Fish, just one of the great record labels. Swonderful. This is Joe Venuti, Eldon Shamblin, Jethro Burns, and Curly Chalker, an album of jazz instrumentals. You'd think that that would be just one of the great all-time records, right? Some people definitely feel that way about it. I am not one of them. Flying Fish had this habit of wanting to produce stuff in Chicago when really, Nashville would have been the place to record a record like this, in my opinion. But hey, people love this record. I won't say anything else except that Curly Chalker absolutely hated working on this album. And a lot of his steel guitar parts were actually overdubbed. He did them a second time. People do love the record. And by the way, some people have called out my horrible taste in albums here in this series, so totally fine. Further indication that you should really, if you have the time, listen to this stuff on your own and give it your own analysis. Don't necessarily listen to what I'm saying. This is just my taste. Marcel Dadi. Okay, we got 4 or 5 of Marcel Dadi's records that he did in Nashville. I've never listened to any of them, but he's a legendary thumb-style jazz guitarist. Super cool stuff. And in the same vein, this Lenny Bro reissue that came out in 1998 on True North Records. This is a compilation of a lot of rare Lenny Bro stuff, including, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4 tracks that feature Curly Chalker recorded in Maine, way up near Canada, where Lenny Bro is from, and totally like Western swing, early country hillbilly type instrumentals from Lenny Bro, Curly Chalker and Company. You might want to check out some of that stuff. I think if you watch this series and that doesn't interest you, then I would be really surprised. Lenny Bro, those are some odds and ends of the Curly Chalker catalog. Just bring this camera back here. There's a few things I forgot to show you already, so let's do that quickly. This is Travis, the album Travis by Merle Travis. Hey, this has got Curly Chalker playing on it. Great album. I know some of you have heard this. This came out on the Stetson label. It was out on other labels as well, probably on Capitol. Really great album. We can't forget about this. This is one of my favorite albums of all time in country music. Jimmy Dickens' greatest hits, re-recording of his greatest hits, like the Travis album, all re-recorded stuff, which is usually pretty hit or miss. This is 1969, Bradley's Barn. This is on Decca Records. Curly Chalker playing some of the most energetic and just wild stuff you ever heard. It's got twin fiddles on it. Jimmy Dickens' voice is at his best here, in my opinion. I did a whole video, I'll put a link to it, of me blabbing on and on about this record. That's enough for today. You got to get this album. This is Jimmy Dickens' greatest hits on Decca. Of course, we've got the Hank records here. Curly and Pete Drake and a few steel players were on these albums. And this is the only Ray Price album that I'm aware of Curly playing on. He might have played on others. I just got this one today. I haven't even had time to look it over yet, but this is For the Good Times. And I don't know how much Curly's playing on this. I know he's playing on a remake of Crazy Arms, so that would be interesting to hear. It's kind of a slowed down version. I believe it's a pretty good record, and this is one of those Tom Bradshaw records here that's got Curly on it. There he is right up there. He's doing Channel on My Mind, one of my all-time favorite country songs, yours too, I'm sure, and a killer version. A lot of the greats on here. There's Alvino Ray, we got Buddy Charlton, Speedy West, Buddy Emmons, the whole gang here. Steel Guitar Express.
'Cause honey, your leading post is gone. You've been there all the time, 'cause that old feeling just keeps coming back. Yes, I'll go on living for you and the love that I once knew. Yes, that old feeling just keeps coming back.
Okay, we come to the Curly Chalker solo albums here. Very exciting stuff, I think. Curly Chalker debut album. This came out in 1966 on Columbia, no less. And Curly Chalker follows in the famous footsteps of Buddy Emmons and Noel Boggs by releasing debuts on Columbia, a very prestigious record label whose oldest recordings go back to the late 1800s. And then there's this long-lost single that came out only in Holland. Very, very curious about this. This is The Race Is On and A Thing Called Sadness. two of the greatest songs on this album. In fact, this is a 45 single, only released in Holland. So this record is probably going to be, for most people, I think, the big Curly Chalker album. It's produced by Pete Drake. The Race is on, A Thing Called Sadness, King of the Road, Together Again, Crying Time is on there as well. I've listened to this album a few times in the last week, and every time I listen to it, more and more just grows on you more and more with each listen. If you can, track down a mono copy of this album if you're going to get one. Okay, this album was done in stereo. Pete Drake had the idea of mixing the steel all the way to the left and the drums panned all the way to the right. I guess at the time must have thought this was like a groundbreaking new concept. The steel guitar, because it's the whole album, the steel is all panned to one side. The steel ends up feeling, when you play it back in a stereo, it ends up feeling a little bit low in the mix. At least for me it did. So I found a real easy solution is to just get the mono version, and then the steel is nice and up there right down the middle of the mix. Everything's more balanced for me. And of course, I know someone will argue with that and say that I'm an idiot, but that's how I feel, and I'm sticking to it. Big hits on big steel, the exciting steel guitar of Curly Chalker, a must-have. These are the rest of the records that Curly put out here on his own. This is Midland Records. That's Scotty's record label out of St. Louis. More Ways to Play, 1974. Now this is the really interesting idea for a record, Nashville Sundown. This is Curly Chalker playing the songs of Gordon Lightfoot. So yeah, really interesting. You're not going to hear anyone else make a record like this. Came out on the Sonnet label in the UK and GNP Crescendo, a label I've never heard of in the US. 1977, the long-lost Counterpoint Sessions. That's the stuff that Curly did with the Nashville Symphony Orchestra. That was put out on Tom Bradshaw's Steel Guitar Record Club. And that's an album. I'd love to know what you think of this record. They're okay for me, these records. Some a little more interesting than others, maybe. This Nashville Sundown album is done on the E9th neck, so it does sound strikingly different from the others. I actually heard somewhere in a research that Curly might have actually planned to do this album on the C6 neck, but then showed up and had an argument or some kind of misunderstanding with the producer, and he was talked into playing it on the E9th neck. I don't know if that's true, but it is kind of funny. And it is pretty amazing that he would just be able to turn around and play it E9th. This last one came out on cassette, Steel Guitar Cassette Club. That would have been, I guess, another one of Tom Bradshaw's projects, perhaps. Curly Chalker's Nevada Breaks, a great album. I like this one quite a bit. And you can find this on YouTube. I think all of this stuff is currently up on YouTube if you want to listen to it, including a mono version of Big Hits on Big Steel, which I'll include in the description of the video. And the last piece I wanted to show you here is something that is really impossibly rare to find, but I want to show it to you anyway. This is the Pals CD with Bobby Caldwell. This is a mega rare lo-fi recording of a rehearsal held in 1973. I've heard nothing but rave reviews of this recording. It's so rare it's not even on Discogs, but it does exist. There were at one time copies of it for sale on the Steel Guitar Forum. I don't know if you can still find one in 2025, but you could certainly look into it. If I ever find a copy of this record, I will absolutely upload it to this channel in its entirety. The tunes, Satin Doll, Mansion on the Hill, Lazy River, Fly Me to the Moon, stuff like that. Curly is mainly on the C6 neck on this one, but there's a couple of E9th tunes that show, you know, what an emotional player he was, in fact. And this was allegedly recorded at Scotty's home studio in St. Louis. Scotty, if you're wondering, was featured in one of the earlier episodes, season 1. That's DeWitt Scott is his actual real name, the steel guitar promoter and businessman. This was a rehearsal that Curly and Bobby were doing for one of the steel guitar convention shows if I have that correct. Well, there'll never be another Curly Chalker. He remains an enigma and a somewhat romanticized character in the story of the steel guitar, one who is both loved and feared. He certainly left his mark, and there will never be a complete list of all of the sessions that he did, so if you're a country music buff, if you're a historian, if you're a geek about the steel guitar, the world is your oyster in terms of tracking down recordings that feature Curly Chalker that have yet to be discovered. He had the ability to be the most instantly recognizable player, while also the ability to disguise his style completely and blend into any pop country record when he was asked to. He does have a son named Carroll Miller, who is a musician and a producer, I believe, in Nashville, and he frequently pops up online when there's a Curly Chalker related post. He would most definitely be someone who would have inside information about Curly Chalker, his life and his career, if you're interested. The next episode we do will feature another speed demon amongst pedal players and a player who's still alive, still with us, living on the East Coast, and I have just about every one of his records here, so I'll be more than happy to share that story with you a week from today, same place, same time. Take care, keep it country, thanks for watching, keep coming back, and we'll see you next time.
Here you go. Down.
Can't put it in. Let me start that again. I'm sorry. Okay? They just Curly knocked me out, man. I don't care. Leave that on tape, will you, that I said that? Curly Chalker on steel, ladies and gentlemen, done such a solo, man. I had to go and ruin the whole thing, man. Just knocked me out. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, man. I got to digging that. I forgot where I was at. My goodness. Do you mind if we do it again? Try that, huh? Thank you.
Wake up every morning. It's a low down and lot of shame. You got your man, baby, pecking on my window pane. That's why I gotta move, yeah. Way to the outskirts of town.